And good evening. There we go. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Good evening. I am delighted to be here. This is a dream speech to deliver for reasons I hope will be clear soon. But first, I have a lovely list of people to thank. Dean Duran for inviting me, for your inspiring commitment to the humanities and enthusiasm about tonight. President Robbins for your leadership and vision. Bennett and Jackie Dorrance for your generosity and spirit. Jim Hensley for guiding the Dorrance Scholars Program. Plus a special welcome to the Dorrance Scholars, because without you, none of us would be here. And a warm welcome to the University of Arizona faculty and community, because you nurture this world of emerging leaders and possibilities. So growing up, I had family in Flagstaff, Phoenix, and here in Tucson. I have fond memories of their desert garden and the hummingbirds at the Desert Museum. It is great to be back. Tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey, looking back and looking forward. It'll be a combination of my personal journey and professional path. We'll look at major themes that are defining, disrupting, and determining the future. And we'll explore where the world is heading, which, without giving up too much of my punchline, is really important. And you all and the humanities are at the intersection of what matters most and may hold the keys to getting things right. Now, to tee things up, the University of Arizona is #1 in Italian graduates, and I majored in Italian, so I can't resist this phrase. Lasciate ogni speranza voi che entrate, which means abandon all hope, ye who enter here. This is Dante at the gates of hell. Now, sometimes I feel like this is how degrees in the humanities are framed, and humanities graduates may feel like Dante. But remember, Dante ultimately gets through purgatory and on to paradise, and I believe that the only way we get to paradise today is if the humanities remain core to our curriculum and the world. Now, as I prepared for tonight, I continue to return to the question, what are the humanities? Which led to, what is humanity? What makes us human? What does it mean to be human? The dictionary defines the humanities in a couple different ways. First, it's the branches of learning that investigate human constructs and concerns, rather than natural or scientific processes. But it also means the totality of human beings, human qualities and attributes, in essence, humankind. The humanities understand that we are all part of humanity, and not, for example, merely a citizen of country X, Y, or Z. More recently, the digital humanities apply and combine digital tools with the humanities, expanding what we can know and how we can learn. Now, from where I stand, there is nothing more fascinating or more important to study than this. And yet, everywhere we look, challenges to humanity and the study of humanities are rearing up. We're in a moment where we could be heading towards a pretty dystopian universe, in which technology has addicted us, we have robot overlords, and we've lost the ability to be in relationship. Or we could be heading towards a pretty idyllic world with unparalleled connectivity, collaboration, and knowledge. This is up for grabs. Now, sometimes it feels to me like we're losing our ability to understand the world, and in some cases, to understand ourselves. And yet, it is precisely because of these shifts in technology, in tolerance, in trust, that we've never needed the humanities more. The humanities are an essential ingredient to how we fix what's broken and forge a brighter tomorrow. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let's go back. As I mentioned, tonight is partly a personal journey, so it would probably be helpful for you to know a little bit more about where I come from. Growing up, my dad was a cultural geographer and my best friend. We didn't have a lot in terms of money or things, but my dad truly loved humanity and maths. As a child, I had a plastic placemat at the kitchen table to keep from spilling, like many kids do. But my placemat didn't have a cat or a ball on it. It had a map of the world. Every morning over breakfast, my dad and I would play the capital game. He'd name a country, and over time, I learned the capitals. Names like Addis Ababa, Ulaanbaatar, and Ouagadougou were magical to say, and I began to dream of visiting these far-off lands one day. Every morning, my dad reminded me of two things. First, that the world is bigger than our own backyard, and diversity is our superpower. He instilled in me that there was nothing cooler I could do than explore the world and understand other cultures and ways of living. We couldn't afford fancy trips to Europe or Asia, but we traveled to national parks, and we camped a lot. In these less expensive places closer to home, I discovered diversity too. The second thing that he taught me was that because I was a girl and got to go to school, that made me one of the luckiest kids on the planet. I understood that education is a right, and it's also a privilege. And because I had been so lucky, I had a duty, a responsibility to give back. Most of all, what this meant was that when it came to my career, it couldn't be about me. It had to be in service to others. Now, my parents never told me what I had to do when they reminded me that I could serve in many ways, as a teacher, a doctor, or an environmentalist. But whatever I did had to be in service to others and the greater good. Now, this is what I thought all kids were taught growing up. It was only when I got older that I learned this isn't the case. But today, I can't underscore enough just how important those early learnings and values came to be. So as I grew up, it became increasingly clear that if I wanted to go and do the things I wanted to do, including visiting Ulaanbaatar, then going to college was a good idea. For reasons I still can't explain, other than having a childhood friend named Anna Maria Zotta, whose family had immigrated from Italy and who fascinated me, I wanted to go to a college that offered Italian. So perhaps lesson number one, trust your hunches. I entered Emory University pre-med, which I actually loved, biology, genetics, and so on. But once I got there, I started to explore. And ultimately, I changed my major 7 times. I tried anthropology and economics and political science, even architecture. So for the students here, I am living proof that you do not have to have it all figured out on day one. Now, ultimately, I double majored in international studies, which is a combination of economics, political science, and history, and Italian. And my lifetime love affair with Italy began. The summer after my freshman year was transformational, one I will never forget. I went on Emory's summer study abroad program to Italy. We spent nearly a month in Rome studying the language, politics, and history, then several weeks in Sicily studying classics and architecture, and several more weeks in Tuscany and the north, studying art and other things. And as I mentioned to the students, yes, we went to Orvieto, and I loved it. So you're well placed. Now, this was the first time that I really had a chance to see firsthand where we come from in terms of concepts like democracy, empires, and religion. I still remember standing inside the church in the town of Pienza, about an hour from Orvieto, and I broke down in tears. The simple beauty of the people and surroundings flooded every cell in my body. My favorite professor, Judy, found me there and hugged me. Now, little did we know that more than 20 years later, we would still talk about how that moment touched both our lives. I began to see that in order to understand and navigate the future, we have to understand our past and our shared culture as humanity. I also began to see that the Western perspective, or any perspective, isn't the full story. But it does give us a good grounding that makes it easier to study other cultures later on. I went back to Emory determined to build an international career and get back overseas as soon as I could. It began to feel like if I worked hard, the world could be my oyster. So I consider that summer was my appetizer. 1 year later, when I returned to study for the entire year at Oxford University, that was my entree. Now, I got a scholarship, which was the only way I could afford it, and I spent the year living and studying with students from around the world. I expanded my knowledge of Italy to Europe, I investigated and learned about the many cultures that comprise the European Union, and I learned what Italian sounds like with a British accent. Now, The humanities were everywhere that year. In my studies, in my travels, in my challenges. It was magic. Now, I thought long and hard about whether to share what happened next. And ultimately I decided to do so because it took my knowledge of humanity to a whole new level. The final week of my studies at Oxford, just when I was supposed to go back to Rome for the summer, both of my parents died in a car accident. Now, I share with you, their accident was actually on June 5th. I cannot tell you, and I share this joyfully. I know they are absolutely thrilled I'm here today. Like, I can feel it in my bones. So I'm really happy to share this with you. Don't worry. I thought long and hard, but this is a key piece. So, getting back to what I wanted to say, yes, this changed my life. Of course it did. And we'll get to that. But what I want to underscore is that in that moment, a deeper understanding of humanity came to the fore. I began to understand profoundly and also question what it means to be human. What's the point if the end result is loss and sadness? If I don't have long to live, because no one knows and look what just happened, what should I do with my limited time on this blue marble, right? So there I was, 20 years old, unexpectedly an orphan, with a lot of hard questions. It was a rough time. Now, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, or how to build my career, or how to rebuild my family. But the one thing I knew was that I wanted to travel. I wanted to explore more of the world and understand other cultures. So following college graduation, I got a Fulbright fellowship back to Italy to study European integration and economic development. It was just the ticket for 1 year, and I got it because I spoke Italian. Now, during that year, I had to ask a lot of hard questions about what to do and what about my career, but also questions about life and death and what really matters. Now, I'm not sure I would have been able to call that humanities back then, but in retrospect, that's exactly what it was. Plus, remember my Professor Judy? Well, turns out she and her family became my family of choice. They opened their hearts and home to me. She didn't just teach me about verb tenses in the Renaissance. She showed me humanity in real life every day. Now, back then, a lot of people told me that I should go work on Wall Street. But my gut said no. I felt like life was too short, and I wasn't sure that the best use of my time and skills was helping wealthy people make money. Now, I love finance, don't get me wrong, but this wasn't the kind of service I had in mind. But I still had to figure out a way to pay for these travels I wanted to take. So, I became a hiking and biking guide. And for 4 years, I guided half the year and traveled the other half. And this was when I met Ira and Dana Adler. Dana is in the audience tonight. We actually hiked through lemon groves on the Amalfi Coast together. Now this is me in the hiking and biking company brochure. Now, during this time, I had a backpack, no permanent address, and the overarching goal of seeing how as much of the rest of the world lived as I could, so that I could craft a career of service that made sense to me. Most of my independent travels were spent in emerging markets and developing countries, which exposed me to very different lifestyles and cost less than if I'd lived in the United States. Now, this was undoubtedly one of the most formative and fun chapters in my book of life, for more reasons than I can count. So my job guiding gave me a black belt in logistics and better interpersonal diplomacy skills than any MBA. My independent travels gave me a black belt in resourcefulness and self-sufficiency. I'm really good at budgeting. I can make $1 last forever. Now, before you ask how could I possibly do this as a young female traveling solo, having experienced what I had gone through, let me tell you, that was one of my greatest assets. Because I was so clearly different and alone, I experienced countless people go out of their way to be kind. There was the Romanian grandmother who threw open her windows and shouted, "Lady, are you lost? You must be lost. Come in here and have some tea." Now, rather than ignoring her or pretending I didn't hear her, I accepted. And I learned more about Romania in one afternoon than in a semester-long class. Or there was the time in Southeast Asia when I was traveling in the back of a truck with a bunch of local women. No one but me spoke English. All of a sudden, one of the women just started scratching my arms relentlessly. Later, I learned she'd never seen freckles, and she was convinced I was either dirty or possessed. True story. Now, I don't say this to make it sound like it was all easy, or I didn't get lonely or get into trouble. All of that happened too. But what I want to underscore is that it is all too easy to get stuck and trapped inside a mindset of our own making. Plus, back to guiding, the reason I got that job wasn't because I was a super strong hiker, but rather because I spoke Italian. That opened up so many other doors. So after 4 years, it was time to go on to grad school, and the humanities would play a key role, albeit in some unexpected ways. So I did a joint degree in international law and finance at Harvard and the Fletcher School. Harvard said that my application was unique, and that my extended time overseas had made me resilient and resourceful, curious and culturally sensitive, independent and interdependent. Now, my point here isn't whether you go to grad school or not, but rather that you're getting a great foundation now. Okay, let's shift a little bit. Let's go from studying to applying what you're learning. Okay? This isn't a career advice presentation per se, but I do have some tips. Now, personally, I've never seen my career as linear or as some kind of corporate ladder that needs to be climbed. Yes, I have always wanted a career that's meaningful, that allows me to learn and explore and contribute, and, as I've shared, to help people in meaningful ways. Over time, I've begun to see my career as a portfolio and a flower, rather than a given set of stairs to climb. It's a portfolio in that I combine and curate and use my skills in different ways over time. It's inherently interdisciplinary. It's a flower in that every few years I level up. I gain a new skill or apply my skills to a new space. I create another petal. Over time, my career flower becomes bigger, more colorful, more interesting, and more valuable. Now, as we'll see, this mindset and way of working is becoming much more common. I couldn't have known this back when I started out, but in fact, it has prepared me very well for the future. So my first landing pad after graduate school was perhaps the easiest because it was directly related to the degrees I just received: law, finance, and global development. I moved to London and I joined the international law firm Allen & Overy, or A&O, doing cross-border finance. A&O is an English law firm with offices all over the world. I was a member of their U.S. law group, which meant that I looked at the U.S. piece of international transactions. I worked with companies and banks and investment funds and learned about things like tax law. Now, let me be clear. I never thought I would work at a law firm. But lest you think I lost my way, I can honestly say I loved my time there for two reasons. First, because I never saw myself there forever. I wanted to learn skills, contribute as much as I could, and then take those skills and apply them to greater impact. And secondly, because I found ways to directly incorporate the humanities into my work. Now, who here is familiar with microfinance or impact investing? Some of the students now should be. Okay. So these are different versions or different flavors of finance with social impact. The goal isn't just to make a bunch of money. Microfinance provides small loans to unbanked entrepreneurs, who are primarily women in the developing world. I say unbanked because these are people with no collateral. Typically, it takes money to make money, and these are people with no money. So, for instance, a $25 loan can start a small business in India, but banks don't typically make these loans. Microfinance does this. Now, I can talk about this all day, so if you're interested, ask later. Back to the law, though. I ended up creating new practice areas focused on exactly this at international law firms based directly on my experiences in the developing world. It turns out that a lot of bankers really like microfinance, but not that many lawyers even know what it is, even though lawyers are essential to getting deals done successfully. So we brought together investors and lawyers from around the world to forge new connections and create social impact at scale. I worked on some of what are even today the largest ever microfinance transactions in the world, deals that helped tens of millions of economically active poor families, so small shopkeepers in Uganda or Guatemala or Bangladesh, get access to finance and lift their families out of poverty. Now keep in mind, these were the same skills that I was using to make one loan to one big company that they burned through in 1 week, or that I could make thousands of loans to transform thousands of lives. Now, the bigger point here, other than that we need to rethink the world of finance, is that the reason I excelled doing this work wasn't because I was a great lawyer, but rather it was because I understood other cultures and global development. This was a direct outgrowth of my Humanities Foundation. So as a junior associate, I was asked to teach senior partners because I was the only person who understood and could translate and could speak these different languages, which catapulted my career forward and led to my first aha that my grounding in the humanities was a superpower in this non-humanities world. And this aha has stayed with me ever since. So after law, I was ready for a new challenge. I found the law super interesting, but it was only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kind of impact I wanted to make. So I also wanted to get closer to the roots of global development. Now, who's familiar with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, all of you need to write this down. SDGs, write them down, because there are a lot of careers that are going to come out of it. So the SDGs are a plan that countries worldwide have committed to solving the world's toughest challenges by 2030. There are 17 goals, including everything from equality to education to renewable energy. Goal number 1 is poverty alleviation, which is exactly what I've been working on and could now go deeper into. So for the next few years, my mission was to connect these different worlds, forge new connections, and help create solutions, again, with financial and social returns. So I worked with microfinance institutions from India to Bolivia. We forged partnerships and business models to bring clean water and safe sanitation from Kenya to Cambodia. My law degree even came in handy because I worked on policy reform, right? We start getting really interdisciplinary and really looking at the whole ecosystem here. So there were lots of highlights, like seeing a family get a water tap or a toilet in their home for the very first time. There were plenty of lowlights, like getting super sick on stage during India's World Water Day celebrations and having to run off stage. No fun. But what I want to underscore here again is that the reason I thrived in these roles was because I understood and was comfortable across different cultures. So I could be in an urban slum one day, I could speak to global development banks the next day, and learn about water filters and public health the next day, and continuously translate between these different worlds. And that led to my next aha, which is that the humanities are valuable everywhere, and especially in the overlaps. Now, I never could have imagined that what I learned about Roman aqueducts I would be able to apply to the global water and sanitation crisis, or that St. Francis of Assisi's teachings on compassion would remind me of what's called Ubuntu, or togetherness in Kiswahili. Studying and understanding the humanities has paid dividends in so many ways. Fundamentally, it's made everything else possible. So, a few years later, not surprisingly, I got restless again. I was ready for a new challenge. I wanted to jump to a new landing pad, create another career pedal, which also brings us to today. So for the last 6 years, I've been an independent advisor, focused on the new economy and the future of work, which we'll hear more about in just a minute. I advise startups like Airbnb, companies like Nike, governments, policymakers, investors, and even universities. I've developed expertise at the intersection of the private, public, and social sectors. In many ways, what I do today is a culmination of everything that's happened thus far, and an opportunity to learn new skills. Most of my time these days is spent advising, speaking, writing, and traveling. I give keynotes, I lead strategy sessions and workshops, and write op-eds, do interviews, and I'm finally working on my first book. Now, like Dean Duran mentioned, I do a lot of global work, typically 10 to 20 countries a year. I was just in Colombia. Next week I'll be in Brazil. Later this month I'll be in South Korea. Now, it wasn't always this way. I've had to work hard to get here, but the journey has been 1,000% worth it. In my work with technology companies, What I am most often asked for isn't technical expertise, but rather my global perspective. Everyone wants to know what everywhere else is doing, how people and markets and cultures differ, and there's still no really easy way to find out. Now, for those of you in the digital humanities here tonight, this is a huge opportunity. And if you want to brainstorm, I'm all ears. All right, now let's really shift gears and look much further forward. How do we combine and integrate the humanities in an increasingly high-tech world? What do the humanities mean for what's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution? And of course, what do we need to do to prepare? Tonight, I picked these three themes because they directly relate to student success, faculty's focus, the College of Humanities, and the university's future. My hunch is that you've heard of these things, but don't necessarily get to think hard about them, and perhaps don't know where to start to learn more. So let's dive in. Let's begin with the future of work, which is already underway, so we can call it the present of work as well. Now, just a quick caveat, fully discussing the implications of the future of work is a whole other keynote, or maybe like 5. There are countless issues, questions, and unknowns. Tonight, we're going to lay some initial groundwork. Now, I'm curious, who here wants to be your own boss? Yep. Look at all the young people. Here we go. Awesome. Who wants to live and work overseas? Yeah, sweet. And of the adults here, who has grown children in the workforce? How many of them have struggled to find a job that they love? Okay. I like to get a sense of the appetite in the room. No right or wrong answer, just kind of seeing who's where. So very quickly, just a little bit of context. For most of human history, we have worked together to stay alive, as hunters and gatherers, farmers, merchants, and guilds. Then, 300-ish years ago, the first industrial revolution began, and along with it came our first notion of a modern workplace. All of a sudden, everything had a price, human labor began to be commodified, more efficient machines increased productivity, and many people found their skills obsolete. We began to pass laws against things like child labor, and saw the rise of a new social contract. Over the next 2 centuries, this industrial model, based on production, consumption, ownership, and employment, took root. And in some cases, it kind of took over, including our idea of what it means to work. Post-World War II, most workers could expect to be full-time employees, working for 1 or 2 companies their entire career. They and their families could expect stability and progress. And yet, in less than 2 generations, this reality is gone. In recent years, almost every aspect of work has changed. How people work, who can work, what work looks like, and how we think about work, period. Parents' advice to study hard, get good grades, go to college, and you'll be guaranteed of a good job no longer works. 51% of recent college graduates have jobs that don't require a college degree. And this number has risen dramatically in the last 15 years. Job security is a myth. Average job tenure in the United States is 3 to 4 years. Amongst millennials, it's only 13 months. That is a world away from lifetime career employment, which was the expected norm and even the dream not that long ago. And it's not even about jobs anymore. Already today, 35% of the US workforce and 47% of millennials are freelance. They're not employees. And the total number is expected to exceed 50% by 2027. So really look at what's happening here. The future of work landscape is shifting dramatically. And that's not all. Consider what is probably the topic when it comes to the future of work and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Automation and AI, or artificial intelligence. Now, automation and AI are showing up everywhere, and they're making a lot of people both excited and nervous for many reasons. First, because automation and AI are redefining the skills that are valuable today. Second, because they go far beyond factories, lines, and robots. Even though I love this scary, cute slide, don't be misguided, right? Automation goes far beyond robots and factories. It extends into sectors from retail and transportation to finance, law, medicine, healthcare, education, you name it. And third, because automation and AI are expected to disrupt and eliminate an unprecedented number of jobs in the coming years. Now, we don't know exactly how many jobs or on exactly what timeline. We also don't know how many new roles might be created. What we do know, though, is that the best research reports out there estimate the number of jobs expected to be lost somewhere between 7 and 70% of all jobs. Now, 7 and 70 is a huge margin, but regardless, it's a lot. McKinsey estimates that globally, 800 million jobs will be eliminated between now and 2030. That's 1/5 of the global workforce, and another 1/3 will need to retrain to keep their current roles. The World Economic Forum estimates that machines will do 42% of all labor by 2022 and 52% by 2025. That's significantly up from about 30% today. And Oxford University estimates that 47% of Americans are at high risk of having their job automated in the next 20 years. So just let that sink in. Now, taken together, this is sounding pretty gloomy. But this isn't a gloom and doom talk, because in fact, these shifts also open up a new universe of opportunity if you know where to look. So think about it. A 12-year-old today with curiosity, access to basic technology, and YouTube can build things that 50-year-olds couldn't build 10 years ago. And with all due respect, that some still can't build today. It's never been easier or cheaper to be your own boss. What used to require an office and furniture and overhead now requires a smartphone and a website. The costs of running your own business have dropped so dramatically, in many cases they're close to zero. Put simply, new technologies make it easier for more people to work in more ways than ever before. Things like remote work, digital nomads, and portfolio careers weren't even possible not that long ago. Today, they're not only possible, but they're increasingly common. Now, I am a good example. 10 years ago, I had no intention of not having a salary. And yet today, I'm a really happy independent professional with unparalleled flexibility. I can do the work I want, when and where I want, and travel and take time off when I want. And I work a lot, and I do need to be places like today. But for the most part, I can be almost anywhere. Now, one of the biggest challenges I believe we face today is that we are stuck in an education system that was designed to train factory workers and soldiers, which was fine for the first industrial revolution, but it's a very poor fit for the 21st century. It also does an extraordinarily good job stamping out curiosity and creativity, which we've never needed more than today. Now, this may be relatively less the case for higher ed, but you're still faced with the problem that by the time students get here, they've been socialized in this earlier, now woefully outdated system. They've been trained to not ask too many questions, study for the test, and to worry about grades, rather than focusing on what they can actually do. And that's not all. Within this outdated system, the humanities are under siege. Now, from where I stand, straddling many worlds, we're at a moment, we're in an era where we run the risk of basically suffocating what universities are meant to do. Now, think about it. Many universities are busy trying to develop products, what we might call an employee, that companies will buy. But meanwhile, jobs are melting. And companies won't be buying these products, at least not as many as we think or hope or would like. You just heard the numbers, right? And at the same time, just around the corner, civilization is melting. And we're busy trying to sideline the people and departments that might actually help save it. Now, this is in no way, shape, or form a commentary about the University of Arizona. In fact, you all are on the exemplary end of things, no question about it. But given the pace of change, this is no time to be riding on your laurels. Now, think about what's going on here. We need universities to be centers of leadership and learning, visionaries and values. Today, we run the risk, some universities run the risk, of becoming pawns for companies with a very uncertain future when it comes to jobs, employment, and expectations. So I look at this and I say, this is bad bargain. Like, a bad bargain for students, for universities and for society as a whole. But this doesn't have to be the case, and it doesn't have to be the outcome. So take the digital humanities. They're still young, but already we're discovering myriad ways that they take the humanities to a whole new level. The digital humanities are a sort of hybrid. You've got one foot in the data-driven analytic world, and the other foot in the cultural storytelling world. This is really unique and really valuable. The digital humanities enable new models, new maps, new ways to understand cultures and learn languages. The digital humanities open the door to new questions, new answers, and new lessons to learn. The humanities and the digital humanities are part of a new bargain altogether. Now, while I'm in a provocative spirit and I've got your attention, let's go a little further. So I do a lot of work with the World Economic Forum, which coined the phrase Fourth Industrial Revolution a few years ago, to describe a range of new technologies that are fusing the digital, physical, and biological worlds together, and in some cases challenging our ideas about what it means to be human. Now, I don't doubt for a minute that we are in an era of unprecedented, massive change and disruption and transformation, on a par with the scale and scope of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions, and the innovations that the steam engine, mass production, and the computer brought about. But I believe we need to look beyond the Fourth Industrial Revolution, because it's an incomplete narrative. So the Fourth Industrial Revolution is a story. By and large, it's a story that focuses on technology as a sort of winner-take-all. It acknowledges that there are human implications, many of which feel foreboding or even dangerous. But it doesn't really consider that humans may have a different story to tell. So take, for example, how machines and people learn. Machines and people learn completely differently. Machines train on data and patterns. They don't have perspective. They lack a point of view. They can be programmed to do X, whether X is ship a package, diagnose or analyze X-rays, or kill someone, but they can't tell you why. Now there's a piece of this future that I'm not sure this is the future we want. I think we might want to write a better story for a bigger world. And this is where you all come in, because you all are at the intersection of what matters most. In the humanities, you understand beyond science or economics. This isn't something that's going to be solved with a better equation or a better app. What's at stake here are cultures and identities and what it means to be human, our responsibilities to one another as humankind. This has to be in the Fourth Industrial Revolution story. The humanities and the digital humanities need to write this script. Okay, so as you've seen, the humanities are a superpower in the workforce and urgently needed in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. But if that's all we did tonight, we would have missed a bigger opportunity. Equally importantly, the humanities are a superpower for life. And tonight is about being and becoming great citizen leaders. So let's go back to that earlier slide where I showed you like we're at a crossroads, where the future could look like either one of these two worlds. At the moment, we're heading towards the left. Today's borderless problems need people that can think beyond borders, that can bridge divides and find common ground. By now, you probably, I hope, know exactly where I'm heading with this. The humanities are part of how we reweave this fabric of civilization. Now, when I think about what it means to be a great citizen and how I learned about that, I go straight back to Italy. The word citizen comes from Latin civitas, meaning city. And for most of history, it had nothing to do with passports or walls. Tonight, let's keep that spirit. Back then, the word citizen was used to distinguish citizens in democratic republics from subjects in a monarchy. The basic orientation was that citizens have rights and responsibilities, and government isn't something that happens to us, it's something we do together. Subjects, meanwhile, are subject to the dictates or whims of a king or queen. Now, some of you probably recognize this illustration. It's Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci, as described by the ancient Roman engineer Vitruvius. Vitruvius is known as the citizen architect. His work paved the way for how we think about citizen life. In some ways, we can think of him as one of the earliest human-centric designers. Vitruvius pioneered the idea that all design should be proportional to the human body and have human well-being at the center, because this facilitates full expression of our citizenship. I first learned about Vitruvius when we explored his buildings in Rome during my summer study abroad. Later, I got to read his original texts at Oxford. These are experiences I will never forget. Now, today, you all are Vitruvius in the modern digital era. You are the citizen leader architects of the future. And it's never been more important to fulfill those responsibilities well. So what does that mean? Well, on one level, that includes, for sure, what you build and create and design and do. But at a deeper level, this also nudges us to rethink the decisions we make on a daily basis. What we buy, what we support, what we consume. Now, some of you may not be old enough to remember or even imagine this, but our job wasn't always to buy stuff. Not that long ago, we knew how to live sustainably on the planet. We took only what we needed, and we prioritized that our very existence depends on Mother Nature's health. We may not have carried passports, but we were pretty great local citizens. Then, throughout the 20th century, first gradually and then incessantly, we consumerized every aspect of society. Not just breakfast cereal. We've consumerized healthcare, entertainment, even education. Remember the employee product I mentioned earlier? So post-World War II, and especially during the Cold War, our job was to be a great consumer. That's how we were told we would keep world order and stability. And yet today we're in a hyper-consumer society, and we're waking up to the fact that we've lost much of our citizen mojo. So we're living unsustainably on the planet. Every year around August, the Earth hits what's called its ecological overshoot, where it can no longer replenish its own resources for the rest of the year. From that point forward, we are literally living on borrowed water, air, forests, and time. Our obsession with consumption and growth has lit our house on fire. Just ask Greta Thunberg, who coined that phrase. Greta Thunberg, who's heard of Greta Thunberg? Yep, okay. The 16-year-old Swedish girl who has catalyzed a global youth movement around climate change. But it's not just climate. Intolerance is on the rise around the world. We're increasingly unable to disagree without polarizing. And we're in endless debates about migration. Who's allowed in and who's shut out. Sometimes it feels like we're losing our own humanity, right? But at the same time, we're also waking up to the fact that this is a journey of rediscovery. We can all be great citizen leaders. Humans are hardwired to care for one another. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, the humanities is what helps us get there. So now, in our final couple minutes, let's take stock of all that we've explored, and let's look towards the horizon and then beyond the horizon. Those things that we don't yet know, perhaps can't know, but that we need to consider and be prepared for, and where the humanities can help. So who thinks the future is going to be pretty grim? Maybe a lot of you by now. Okay, good. We've still got most of you. Well, what kind of dystopia are we heading into? Is the future going to be more like George Orwell's 1984, where society is controlled and books are banned and Big Brother rules? Or is it going to be more like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, in which no one even reads books anymore and we're done in by laziness? Or maybe it'll be something else altogether, like modeled on the Game of Thrones. Now, the point is, there is no one answer. It all depends on the stories we tell. And if the story is right, then people will say, that's a future we want. Now, think about the magical, mythical, super powerful hybrid beings that we've told stories about throughout history. The Sphinx, half human, half lion. The Chimera, part lion, part goat, part serpent. More recently, the X-Men. Long ago, the centaur was half human and half horse. Oh my goodness, too many hybrid beings. Half human and half horse. Today, the centaur is making a digital revival. We are in the midst of what futurist Kevin Kelly calls the centaur revolution. We're becoming digital centaurs with technology augmenting what we can do. Now, for those of you who are in the digital humanities, you're already partly there. For the rest of us, we need to level up ASAP. Now, I'm not bringing up these hybrid creatures just for fun or to make some random illusion. I actually want to offer that your future, our future, is to some degree as centaurs. We will have one foot in the technological world and the other foot in humanities, using technology as a natural extension of our capacity. This will be not only what saves your job or what makes you unautomatable, though it's likely to do that too, it may well be what saves civilizations. So, coming full circle, there has never been a more exciting or important time for the humanities, period. You all are the bridge to what may rescue and heal civilizations. So as the humanities are under siege, I suggest you double down. From where I stand, I never could have imagined all of the doors that the humanities would open way back when, and even today. From where I stand tonight, the humanities are the glue, the connective tissue that holds us together and illuminates the path ahead. The humanities teaches what the world needs, including how to rehumanize business and care for society. The humanities prepares problem solvers of tomorrow with superpowers and super perspectives. The humanities provide continuity amidst unprecedented change. And last but not least, the humanities are core to the University of Arizona's leading edge. Your goal is to set the standard for a global university in the digital age. The humanities and the digital humanities are what set you apart. And with that, thank you for listening.